And we are live. Hi. Hello. So I'm here. I'm Jenny Smith-Camejo. I'm the Communications Director for Positive Women's Network USA. And I'm here today with Antoinette Jones in Atlanta, Georgia, and Waheedah Shabazz-El in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We are talking about HIV at 40, what long-term survivors need, what they want you to know. So should be a great conversation. I'm going to let Antoinette and Waheedah introduce themselves in just a sec, but I would love if we could just have a short moment of silence in memory of Marco Castro Bojorquez, who passed away yesterday. Extremely sad, a huge loss for the HIV community and for our world more generally. So just a moment for him. Thank you. Yeah, so how about we'll just go from left to right here. Antoinette, do you want to go ahead and start? Just introduce yourself.
Sure. So hi, everybody. My name is Antoinette Jones. I'm an HIV peer specialist and advocate here in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been living with HIV for 26 years, and I'm just so happy to be here, grateful to be here. And I'm actually really grateful for PWN to recognize that people who were born positive, have been living with HIV since birth, are also long-term survivors. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Antoinette, for joining us. I'm Waheedah Shabazz-El. I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My pronouns are she, her, and beautiful. And I am currently the National Network Coordinator for the Reunion Project. And I am a founder member of Positive Women's Network. I'm also a founder member of Bully, Black United Leadership Initiative. And I'm so happy to be here surviving this epidemic, right? So thanks for having me.
Thank you both so much for being here. You're both super inspiring, and I'm always honored to share space with you. And yeah, Waheedah is also known as Waheedah the Legend, in case you didn't know. She is legendary. For sure. And she used to be our organizing director for a number of years. And so I'm always excited to get to see you again. We've definitely missed you since you retired and moved on to your other projects, because you don't know how to retire completely. That was your second retirement, right?
Exactly. I'm going to try it again. Maybe you all will let me, sit down this time around. But I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing, kind of creating a movement of long-term survivors. I think it's awesome. I help create a movement of women, empower women living with HIV, and so I'm pleased where I am right now.
Well, thank you so much for all your leadership and inspiration. Yeah, so to get started, of course, we know that June 5th, which is this Saturday, marks the 40th anniversary of HIV as being recognized as the virus that it is. That was when I believe the first few cases were officially identified. And so that means 40 years. We're 40 years into the epidemic. Unfortunately, we still don't have a cure. Still don't have a vaccine, but things have certainly come a long way in certain regards, and then not so far in other regards. And we're going to get into all of that. But just to sort of get started, because you are both long-term survivors, and obviously you have a very different experience. Antoinette, you've lived with HIV your entire life. Waheedah, of course, you acquired HIV as an adult. So just to get started, whatever you all are comfortable with sharing in terms of your story of, how you were diagnosed or when you found out about living with HIV and how that affected you.
Okay, so I'll go. So I like to say that I was diagnosed at 3 times in my life. So once when I was a baby, of course, and then once when my mom disclosed to me my HIV status, which was around the age of 9 or 10. And then once when I finally learned to actually accept HIV and what I was living with. And those 3 different stages in my life, they impact me greatly because although my mom told me about my status at 9 years old, I didn't really accepted or want to be a person living with HIV. I didn't want to be different. Of course, because, you know, you're young, you're a child, and it's something where it's like, now I'm going to have to deal with the fact that I'm different from anybody else that I encounter or any of my other friends. And, you know, my mom made that very clear. She tried to give me all the knowledge and tools about HIV. And that's why I advocate today, because of everything that she was able to teach me, you know. Many people don't receive this type of education around HIV. So I had the opportunity to go through the school system knowing the truth about HIV, even though I had to listen to teachers and people around me still be stigmatized or still stigmatize HIV as a virus, you know. So once I turned 18 and got out of school, of course, there was a point in my life where it was like, I don't know what it was, honestly. I like to say 18, but honestly, it probably hit when I started working at Sister Love or started my advocacy journey and I actually got the chance to meet other women or other people living with HIV, where I realized, okay, this is something that I can accept. This is something that I can live with. And I can be vocal about, because I saw other people in my life who were vocal about living with HIV, and it empowered me and inspired me that it's something that it's fine to live with, you know, and you can thrive and still do your thing. So, yeah, I like to say I was diagnosed 3 different times. Each time was very different. And this is where we are today, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. That's a new take for me, the 3 different times, but I can definitely see how as a child, getting that information is different. Waheedah, how about you?
Yeah, Antoinette, I just want to say I'm really honored to hear your story, because I have my son is married to a woman living with HIV. They have a couple of children, and they serial converted. But life could have been a whole lot different for them. But I'm really happy to hear you share. I think it's a really powerful story that you have. Thank you for that. So I was a bit older when I was diagnosed. I was actually diagnosed. My serial birthday is next Friday, June 11th. I was diagnosed June 11th, 2003, at the age of 49. I was actually incarcerated, doing a 6-month incarceration in the Philadelphia County Jail as a direct result of a drug addiction that I had at the time. I'll be 68 on my birthday, and I have 19 years clean and serene from chasing drugs. So I only got tested to get off the block. People would come in from the health department, I would imagine. They would tell us about STDs, STIs, HIV, and they would offer testing. But I never wanted to get tested. And then after being there for a couple of months, I'm like, okay, let me get tested because I can get to walk around a little bit, right? And so, and it wasn't a rapid test, so I had to wait 2 weeks for the result. I forgot about the results when they called me in to get the results. So we're in this room, and there's no curtains because you know you can't be in the room in a closed room with somebody. So people are walking by. They know what this room is for. Everybody knows what happens in this room, and I'm sitting there crying my heart out because this woman told me that not only did my test come back positive, but she told me that it was AIDS. And so the first time I was tested for HIV, I already had AIDS. So she gave me a pamphlet where I asked, well, she kept asking me, did I want to call somebody? do you want to call somebody? I'm like, look, I've made a mess of my life. I'm on drugs. I guess I lost my house. I'm in jail. And now you're telling me that I'm dying, because that's what I heard when she told me that I had AIDS. And I'm like, who am I going to call? I could only rely on a higher power. At that time, I just didn't see it. So she gave me a pamphlet, and I took that pamphlet to my room, and I took that pamphlet and I hid that pamphlet, and I had a Bible and I had a Holy Quran. I put the pamphlet in the Holy Quran. People would ask to borrow my Bible sometimes, but nobody ever asked me could they borrow the Quran. And I would read that little pamphlet every night, and I'm thinking that, okay, I'm gonna die. People thought I was reading the Quran. I was reading that pamphlet, you know. And then about maybe 2 weeks later, I found out that my mother had died, and they wanted me to come to my mother's funeral, and I just couldn't do it. I just could not go to my mom's funeral in an orange jumpsuit with shackles and dying from HIV, because that's what I thought I was doing. I said, well, I'm going to see her soon, because I figured I would die any day. And then, as it turned out, one day I got an official visitor. Oh, let me say this. When I got diagnosed, I was in a minimum security jail, and it was a new building. So it was nice, it was fresh, it was air conditioned, it was all that. About a week after I got diagnosed, I got shipped to another building, which was horrible, and I couldn't understand. And there was no cells in this building, but they were like it was like a barn. And when I asked about why does this building look like this, they were telling me it used to be a horse stable in the early days when the correctional officers rode horses. And so now they were housing women in this big horse stable. And like I said, there were no doors. They was just like what you call it, like it only came to your waist. The wall came to your waist, and you were inside of like a little horse trough or something. It was horrible. And then one day I got a visitor, official visitor, and I'm thinking, oh wow, my family must have got me a lawyer, or something. But he came and told me he was a person living with HIV. So come to find out, he was from a linkage program. As a matter of fact, it's the program that I work for today, Philadelphia Fight. His name was John Bell. He came and started talking about HIV, and he was telling me that he had been living with AIDS for 20 years. And that gave me so much hope. And on top of that, he said he came to find me. And why that's so important to me is because I felt like I didn't have any value. I felt like I didn't have any worth or any value. And for him to say that I went to the other facility, they told me you had been transferred, so I came to find you. That meant everything to me, because he could have just put my name on the bottom. Oh, she's not here. I'll put her name on the bottom of the list. Wait till it come back up. But for him to say he came to find me it was like my bridge over troubled water. He gave me some hope that I knew that it wasn't the end. And so when I left the prison, I knew where to go because of him. I knew where to go. I knew how to stay linked into services, linked into care. And then he just kind of just mentored me, and I'm going to stop there. Yeah, I was very fortunate to have that bridge over troubled water early on. A lot of us, some of us get it, some of us don't, right? But I'm really thankful for John Bell. He's passed now, but I'm really thankful for him, coming in, helping me feel like I was worth something. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, a common theme I hear coming from both of you is how important the connection with other people living with HIV has been for you in terms of coming to terms with your own diagnosis and feeling like you have the strength and the wherewithal to keep fighting and to survive and thrive. Yeah, I mean, that's really why Positive Women's Network is here, which I know Waheedah, I know this wasn't on our original run of show, but if you want to share just a few words about how the founding of PWN and what that did for you as a woman living with HIV.
Yeah, so in 2008, there was a call for women who were already doing the work in the community, or we were already leaders, that there was this call for this convening in California. And I was encouraged to fill out the application, fill this out. There's going to be a convening. You're going to get to go. I really didn't know what it was all about, but when I got there in California, there were like about 28 of us. There were about 28 of us there, and we ranged from, I believe, from 18 to about 68 years old. We were Black, we were white, we were Hispanic, we were Native American, we were able people, we were people with disabilities. Some of us we were people who could hear. I think we had a person there who could not hear, who was hearing impaired. But we were all women living with HIV. We were brought from all over the country, and we decided on that day that we could create this pipeline of leaders that will work together, not for individual causes, right, but to be able to uplift other women living with HIV. And we gave ourselves, we agreed on a set of values that we would do this work under, like, using this set of values, and then we would all go back and we would try to start chapters where we all came from. And so I was fortunate to go back in Philadelphia, and I believe we started the first chapter outside of Oakland in Philadelphia, and it was PW in Philadelphia, and that was PW in Pennsylvania, right? So now they're doing state work, and I'm re-engaged with them just recently, kind of like re-engaged with that chapter. But it was an amazing experience. I didn't realize what we were doing, that we were creating a movement of women. And these women, man, these women are strong, and we cannot end the AIDS epidemic without women, right? So we wanted to be centered. We didn't want to be a part of the problem. We wanted to be a part of the solution, right? So we centered women in places where policy and programs were being made, and we taught them that they had a voice and how to represent themselves and other women in all of these spaces. So yeah, thanks, Jenny.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I do feel like, it's networks of people living with HIV are so critically important on so many levels, from just the personal connection side and the support to the advocacy and really making change. And speaking of change, I'd love to hear from both of you how you've seen the HIV epidemic in the US in particular change over, I think 26 years and 20 years are the survivorships that you represent. How have you noticed things change?
You want to go into that?
Sure. One thing that I thought about when Waheedah said that when she received her diagnosis, it was as if she thought she was going to die, was when I received my diagnosis as a baby. Of course, I don't remember being a baby, but my adopted mom remembers me receiving that diagnosis. And, exactly what they told Waheedah was what they told her, was that, I wasn't going to live very long, and that this was a baby that was possibly going to die. They didn't have much research or information back in 1994. Like medicine was just coming out and being improved at that time. So it was probably very scary for her, and to know so many people now who was born with HIV, who were vertically transmitted, and have so many peers, and to see like, oh my gosh, throughout 1980 and 1990, there was so many of us who were born with HIV, but we're like this community that nobody knows about, is crazy. But to be here now and to see that you rarely see babies born positive, you rarely see women who can't reach undetectable, or have children, or that stigma around having children. Women are becoming more confident in the fact that they can live with HIV and have children. And me, myself, like right now I'm pregnant. So it's like, it's inspiring for me because all my life I was like, oh, when I have a baby, my child is definitely not going to be born with HIV, because as growing up, I was so stigmatized, I was so like at fear, even with everything that I knew, but it was still like, I didn't want to have a child and for them to have to go through everything that I've gone through as someone who was aging with HIV. And that was my goal. I was like, whenever I become pregnant, whenever that is, I know for sure I'm going to do everything I need to do so that my child doesn't have HIV. And now we see U equals U. Now we see, oh, if you're undetectable, your child won't be born with HIV. And you can have vaginal births. You don't have to have C-sections. So it's just completely different. And I think today I still have to advocate some providers. I even have to advocate some peers who are pregnant and let them know, like, don't let these providers who don't have knowledge around HIV or being undetectable or, try to coerce you into certain things that you don't want to do as a pregnant person. Like, don't let them tell you that you have to have a C-section. It's mandatory, when they know that you do not have to have a C-section and you can have a vaginal birth and you can have that experience. And one thing that we're advocating for now is around breastfeeding, of course. So trying to show people that if U equals U means undetectable equals untransmittable, and you can have sex with your sexual partners without having all this risk of transmitting HIV, then the same should be for breast milk. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. That was one of the things I was going to talk about. So I'm glad you talked about that. And I just want to just reverberate. Antoinette talked about how people were living longer, right? That now some people went from taking 36 pills a day. People were telling me they were waking up every 4 hours. They couldn't even sleep at night. They had to wake up every 4 hours and take these pills. And now some of those same people are still here and they're taking one pill once a day. So that's kind of blowing me away. And I also realized that people are not. I work on another project in Philadelphia. It's called Remembrance, and I'm collecting stories about people who live with HIV in the city of Philadelphia. And what I have found is that I have to go find the older people, like before 2000, to talk about people who died from HIV, because people were not dying from HIV anymore. When I talk to people that got diagnosed after me, like say 2005 to the present, they don't have any people to talk about who passed away. People are not dying from HIV anymore. So I had to go and dig and find the older folks, the people who were around early in the day. So I learned that from working on Remembrance. People are not dying anymore, right? And although people were still, and I also found out that people were still living some isolated lives. People lived isolated lives back then. People were still living isolated lives, either by choice or by chance, right? I learned that through the Reunion Project, because that's one of the things that we do, is find ways to bring people out of isolation. Antoinette talked about reproductive justice. She talked about not having to have C-sections. I heard her say vertical transmission. That's something else that has changed, that we're not using stigmatizing language anymore, where we used to say mother-to-child transmission, and that put like a judgment on the mother. Right? So to say vertical transmission, or to say someone who contracted HIV at birth or soon after birth, right? So the language has changed. That is another thing that's changed. Another thing that's changed, well, and I mean also the Ryan White Care Act is giving people like me teeth. People with HIV don't have to walk around with empty mouths anymore. That's something that's also changed. Economic justice continues to elude us, whether we're aging in retirement. There are a lot of challenges for people who are aging in retirement. A lot of people want to work, but they fear they're going to lose their benefits, especially their medical benefits. That hasn't changed. I want to thank Sister Love for starting the Leading Women 2020 Society for Women, because it became a sorority for women living with HIV. And I'll speak for myself, I never really finished college to the point where I never like went to a 4-year college where I was ever in a sorority, right? So this being a part of the Sister Love Leading Women Society is something big for me, right? So that's huge to give women that boost, right? And of confidence that we need. People living with HIV no longer are easily approved for SSI like they were back then. Now you got to get a job, because back then you apply for SSI and they gave it to you because they knew you was going to die in 30 days. That's not the case now. HIV active, and I took notes. That's why I'm looking over here. It's okay. Can I keep going, Jenny? Okay. So HIV activists have begun to work with organizations that intersect with HIV, right? And that's a great thing. I remember a couple of years ago, one of the largest protests around healthcare. That wasn't just people living with HIV. It was people from all types of disability justice, from all type of other organizations for whom healthcare was a priority. We've been involved in electoral organizing, getting the vote out. People with HIV never did that, but women with it, we're doing that now, and that's something that was different. Calling out racism, we haven't been doing that in our agencies and people that we work with. Early in the early days, the only organizations I knew that did direct action was ACT UP and CHAMP. And so now we have trans justice organizations have been solidified. They were trans organizations early on, but they weren't solidified, like they're gone. Right, but now we have Positively Trans. We have the Transgender Law Center, right? We have organizations like PWN USA. We have the National Working Positive Coalition. We have Serial Project, the Caucus United. We have a caucus, the United States Caucus, people living with HIV, the Reunion Project, and Cure Research is finally back on the front burner. Although I have to say, I take one pill once a day. I'm cured enough. Personally, everybody got to take one pill for something, whether it's a vitamin or something. So I'm okay right now. But those are some of the things that I've noticed that have changed over the last 20 years. Yeah.
Thank you both so much. Yeah, and that's a lot. And Waheedah, I know you touched on a few things that haven't changed in terms of, we're still fighting for economic justice, for access to healthcare. What are other things that should have changed but haven't, that we still need to change? Yeah,
so expanded Medicaid expansion is something that should change, right? Most people a lot of people with HIV are covered by Medicaid, particularly people who are under the national poverty level. We're receiving Medicaid, and we need that. And it has been shown that the states where Medicaid expansion has not happened, that you see high rates of death, HIV death, right? And people shouldn't be dying in the richest country in the world for lack of health care, right? So I say that's one thing that needs to change. Also, I don't know if I touched on HIV criminalization, but I need to talk about that, because HIV criminalization, it needs to go away. It is another way of policing our bodies, and the historic criminalization of Black people. I think we kind of feel as though here's another way to lock up Black folks, right? Here's another way to lock up poor folks. The war on drugs was a war on poor people, was a war on families, right? There was unequal sentencing. These sort of things need to go away. I'm very happy that we have the progressive district attorney here in our city, Larry Krafts. We just voted him in again. We have the progressive district attorney who's doing restorative justice, who's doing justice reform. So those are some things. Cash bail needs to go away, right? There are some states that don't have it, and I know that our district attorney has actually went to the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania trying to get that changed. People linger in the jails without being sentenced, and then it just throws them right back into poverty and homelessness and everything else. There's a lot of things that haven't changed. I could go on and on. You want me to go on and on? because I could go on and on.
From Antoinette, and then you can go on some more.
Mention what? What do you want me to mention?
Oh, I said let's hear from Antoinette, and then you can go on some more.
Okay, sure. Go ahead, Antoinette.
I was going to say the exact same things as Waheedah. One thing that we face here in Georgia is the criminalization laws. That's actually one thing I didn't know much about. My mom educated me around the scientific parts of HIV, but I don't think she even knew the criminalization laws until I got involved with YHPA, which is Youth HIV Policy Advisor Program here in Georgia. And they educated us about, that people living with HIV can face up to 10 years in prison if they don't disclose their status. And I think everyone in the room was just shocked. Like, we all looked around like, who did we not disclose to? And what should we do? Because it implemented this fear into our lives that we were just terrified. Terrified of something, of a diagnosis that we have no control of, And it made me want to do more research and advocacy around the changing these laws. And we saw, I think last year, they did have a law on the table, a bill on the table to change these laws from the language around these laws from intent to transmit. But that bill fell off because of COVID. It didn't leave the House. So it's unfortunate, but it's something that needs to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to put in a plug for HIV is Not a Crime, which is starting next Monday. If anyone watching is not already registered, it's not too late, I believe. You can go to hivisnotacrime.com and check it out. It's all virtual this year, so you won't have to travel anywhere. Although I really do miss seeing folks in person. Hopefully next year we'll be doing more things in person again and getting to actually hug people, because that human touch is missing. But Waheedah, you had some other things to add to the list of what still needs to change.
One of the things that also needs to change is justice LGBT folk, right? There's been like this big war. It seems like there's been a big war on Black trans women for the last couple, 2-3 years. They're just killing Black trans women, and I don't see legislation, or I don't see their elected officials, right, working hard enough to make a change about this, right? And I'm not saying that everything should be made into a hate crime. I need to say that, because when things are made into a hate crime, people get more time, but they don't get to work with the people that they hurt. So restorative justice is something that we need to work on, like really be worked into our court system, that people who violate a specific population of people because of their gender, because of their race, they should get to work with these people to see them in their whole humanity. Right? Because these people are not being seen in their whole humanity. They think these are throwaways and tossaways, and they're not. Everybody belongs to a family, and everybody has human rights. So I think that's another thing that really needs to change. And that's one thing that I love PWN, because we work very, very hard for justice for all women, but we do particularly demand justice for people of trans experience and gender non-conforming people, right? And so I think that is something that we would continue to fight about. This bathroom issue was ridiculous. I'm like, first the Black people couldn't go to the bathroom, now the gay people can't go to the bathroom. What is going on in this bathroom, right? That people can't use the toilet. So that was like, and then in some states that's still a problem. Sometimes when I look at historical movies about Black people in the early days in this country, and I said, well, what was the difference? First it was Blacks, then it was LGBT folk or gender nonconforming people, and even in the city of Philadelphia, we had a problem where we used to have these bus passes, and the bus passes that you bought, they put an M or an F on your bus pass to identify that you were a male or a female. And if you let somebody in your family use that bus pass, I'm a woman. If I let my son use that bus pass, the driver would stop him and challenge him and tell him, you can't use that pass because it has an F or female. So we worked really hard in Philadelphia to remove the gender stickers off the bus passes. I mean, if you pay $65 a month for a bus pass, it doesn't matter. You got your money, right? It doesn't matter why put people in harm's way and call people out, because that's how you calling people out, or they don't look feminine enough today, they don't look masculine enough today. Then you have a bus driver calling people out. So we put a into that. And so that's something that did happen here. We put it into, but there's so much discrimination that is happening with immigrants. There's so much discrimination that is happening in this country. And if we all want to work to try to make this world a better place for everybody. And so there's so much advocacy to still be done, Jen. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for flagging the I feel like the violence against people of trans experience and all of these, like you mentioned, the bathroom bills, that was, I think, the last few legislative seasons. This time, yeah. It's about girls' sports in schools. So
yeah.
now it's not enough to go after adults. Now we're also targeting children. It's and I think there's a direct correlation when you have politicians who are spewing this rhetoric, and then you actually have violence, physical violence and sexual violence happening on the streets. There's definitely, it's connected, it's
yeah. It becomes like a domino effect, yeah. And so until we have to keep demanding not just civil rights, because this is bigger than civil rights. I mean, we did the civil rights movement back in the 60s. This is not about civil rights anymore. This is about human rights now. I've sat in the United Nations and I've watched all the leaders of all the worlds come together and say all of this rhetoric of what they're going to do when they get back. They're going to make sure everybody gets fed and everybody gets housed, and they're going to make sure everybody gets an education, and then they go back and sit on their hands. Right? So, we have to make sure. And like, I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt, she said, until these rights take place in the smallest of villages, in the smallest of places in the world, in the smallest of villages, doesn't mean anything. Everybody's entitled to live at the level of human dignity. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I keep fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
I know what it is. I lived in the horse stable. Okay, so I'm fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think it's really salient that we're one of the richest countries in the world, and I think what is the percentage of people living with HIV who are not virally suppressed? It's not that viral load is a measure of worth, but I think it really points to a lack of access and to other barriers to care, because in countries that have universal health care, you don't see that kind of disparity in the numbers. You might have a small percentage of folks who are not in care, but it's definitely not to the levels that we have here, and certainly not falling along the same sort of demographic lines as it does here when it comes to socioeconomics and race. We have huge barriers to care. Yeah.
And now we have the COVID epidemic. For Black people, we're like dealing with not just Black people, with people living with HIV. We're dealing with two different epidemics at the same time, but you see the disparities when it comes to poor people and brown people. I remember when I went and got my vaccination, I think I think my husband and I were the only Black people in the line, and I was in January, and we kept looking, where are the okay, so yeah. And the lines were long. They were very, very long. And they were long with people who didn't look like me. Yeah. Right. And so I'm glad that there has been, and where I live at, there has been the Black Doctors Consortium that has been trying to bring about trust amongst the community to be able to come out. And now they're giving out lotteries. I heard they had $1.5 million lottery in California.
Supposedly.
That's what
I am vaccinated. I have not been notified.
Yeah, I heard this on the call last night. They have a lottery in New York. They have a lottery in Ohio. There's a lottery, and then the president said that if you get vaccinated, you get a beer, get a shot and get a beer. He said that this morning. Get a shot and get a beer, not a shot of liquor. Get a vaccine, and somewhere, some kind of way, you get a free beer. Budweiser is giving out beer. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's been a wild year, and I guess for HIV it's been, wow, yeah, a long 40 years of, on the one hand, a lot of progress, and on the other hand, we see politics continue to stand in the way of the promise of all that progress.
But Jenna, what I want to say about long-term survivors, right, is that I can't tell you that you're a long-term survivor, right? That's something that you claim for yourself, and some people say, well, you have to have had HIV for 10 years to be a long-term survivor. Who knows? That day you got diagnosed could have been the longest day of your life, right? So I can't say to you, because you haven't lived with HIV for 10 years, you're not a long-term survivor. There has to be a broader definition. Well, that's what we do at Reunion Project. We have a broad and inclusive definition of what long-term survivorship is. Understanding that some people contract it at birth, some people contract it as young adults, and other people contract it and when they're older. So so who's to say, right? Because I contracted HIV last year, that I haven't struggled. This hasn't been the biggest struggle of my life, but I will say this to everybody here: we've all been surviving from something even before HIV. If you look at it, we've all are survivors in this country. We just survived 4 years of I don't know what that was, right? So we're all survivors, and I'm just so pleased that we're celebrating that we are still here, right? Surviving, and that we are all still holding one another up as a community, And I think I might be getting to your next question. Maybe not the next question, but I just feel like community is all. Had it not been for community, this was not something I could do by myself. And I like doing stuff by myself, but not this. Yeah. HIV is something I can only do, right, with the support of this wonderful, wonderful, amazing, non-judgmental, community that just like accepts all of us, right, in our condition. I love everybody that I have met on my journey. It's been amazing. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, and thank you for pointing out, Waheedah, that it's long term. Since I've been working with PWN, like every time around this time of the year, you start seeing these debates popping up about who is and isn't a long-term survivor. And I'm like, really? Is that what we need to be arguing about? Like, with everything else going on, are we really like trying to tell people, no, you're not a long-term survivor because you're too young?
Exactly.
Actually, I'm presenting at the HIV is Not a Crime, and I have a slide about long-term survivor.
Oh, great.
And now I have to go back and change that slide after what you said right here, because I did put a time on my slide, and that's from what I heard or what I learned about, in order to be a long-term survivor, you must be living with it for this long. And now I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to put an age or time on my slide. I'm going to change that. I've
heard that too, but I disagree.
It's different for everybody. Mm-hmm.
I disagree. Yeah, because I can't tell you that you're not a long-term survivor.
I have a peer who grandmother had HIV, and they were raised by their grandmother, so they had to experience everything firsthand of what it was like to live with HIV. Yeah. And they then later in life received the HIV diagnosis. And it was as if they are long-term survivors because they had that experience from their grandmother and then their own diagnosis.
And our families who who walk this journey with us are all long-term survivors as well. our families, our advocates, our accomplices, right? I was going to say our allies, our accomplices, right? Are all long-term survivors. They go through this with us, you know. So I'm glad that you heard that from me, and I didn't make it up, but this is this is one of our principles of the Reunion Project, is that you self-identify as a long-term survivor. Yeah.
Yeah, and thinking of folks who are being diagnosed right now, and obviously being diagnosed in 2021 is different from being diagnosed in 1985 or in 1994. But what would you say to someone who is being diagnosed today? And I'm sure both of you do have conversations with folks who have been recently diagnosed.
Of course, I get asked this all the time. My answer always changes because it's just so much that you can say to someone who's newly diagnosed. But I just tell them, it takes time, of course, and to move at your own pace. A lot of the faults that I experienced was because I was either rushed into a lot of things that I wasn't comfortable with or ready for. And you should be able to accept your HIV diagnosis at your own pace. But I also like to say that, especially for people who deal with a lot of stigma, internalized or external stigma, we are what science looks like. We are the HIV epidemic, the people who are living with HIV, because we're still here today. We're still doing our thing, living. So to believe that HIV is a death sentence or anything but what you see in front of you, which is beauty, is absolutely crap, So that's why HIV, of course, doesn't have a face, but if you want to put a face to a name, this is what it really looks like.
Thank you. And I would add, for people who are diagnosed today, take your medication. Take your medication. And for those of us who can be virally suppressed, or as close as you can get, but have sex. That's what this is all about. Right? Somebody I have a friend who always does this. When she shows sex, she always does this. Have some of this, right? I think this is really like what this is all about. And live your life. It's not too late to be who you wanted to be. It's not too late to do what you wanted to do, right? Don't let HIV hinder you, right, from being what you would from your dreams, right? From your dreams. And Antoinette touched on this, addressing the internal stigma. Right? Understanding that disclosure is a continuum. You may disclose here, you may not disclose there, you may not disclose on your job, but you may, you know what I'm saying? But it's a continuum, and you don't have to disclose in order to be an effective advocate. And I remember long ago, a person who taught me, who still continues to teach me, is my mentor, would say that they would hear somebody say something crazy about HIV. Oh, girl, you let her use your phone? Don't you know she got that hot stuff? And she said that she would smile and say, I used to think the same thing about HIV, but I read somewhere, I saw a documentary, I know a person living with HIV, and that's just not true. So we can all be advocates for HIV, to get rid of the myths without having to share. And I don't even use the word disclose anymore, right? Share without sharing our status. Is mine to share. Disclosure sounds so like it's something dark and dingy and bad and stuff like that, right? So I choose to share my status. If I think it's going to save a life, right, then I'm here to be just in service. So I would just tell people who are diagnosed today, you're more fortunate than those who were diagnosed 40 years ago. That death is not coming for you, right? Take the medications, get yourself a support circle, because this is not something that you can do alone. You know, you will thrive. You will thrive, right? If you become a part of this community, you will thrive, because they will make sure that you thrive. You know, you have folks like, I call myself trying to retire, and like everybody's like, no, she's not gonna retire. You come on in here. So I just continue. So I've just shifted, but I found a group of folks, even though they're not newly diagnosed, they're long-term survivors, right? So I just made a shift, but I'm always willing to shift back and be able to support someone who's newly diagnosed, right? To let them cry. To let them cry. When folks are crying with because they got diagnosed, let them cry. Because we like to run and get the tissue, right? But then you stop. But they got to feel what they feel, and they got to get through to the other side, right? So that's what I would say. Let them cry, you know, and then give them some water, right? So they'll get dehydrated. So here's the thing, right? Nothing grows without water. Nothing grows without water. And sometimes we just need to get that good cry out, you know, and just keep putting one foot in front of the other. But it's no longer a death sentence, right? They're not going to give you an SSI check, right? You're going to have to go back to school. A young person said to me, they was about 19. Oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with myself. I said, what would you do if you didn't have HIV? He said, I'd probably be in school. That's what you need to do. You're 19. You need to be in school. You know, yeah. So just you know, and not giving. I'm just, and this is maybe this is tough love. I don't know, but just saying is, listen. There's some worse things than having HIV. You could have HIV and be on drugs. You could have HIV and not have a place to live. There are a lot of things that's worse than just being a person living with HIV, right? But we learn how to navigate our lives with HIV through our support systems, through our support groups, through our our lives with HIV, so that we don't go to jail, right? So that we learn why we got to take the medicines, how they work in our bodies. And then we learn why we got to keep them in, keep that certain level in, right? Keep our viral loads down. Yeah. And we share our status with those who need to know. Yeah. To have sex.
And I also want to add, it's important to educate yourself on what you're living with. Because the more you know, you can, like Waheedah said, you can correct anybody on who try and tell you about HIV without having to share your status. So just educate yourself, know exactly what it is that you're living with.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, you don't have to be living with HIV to educate yourself and to be an advocate and to correct misinformation and lies and
exactly
myths, hear them. Yeah. What would you say to someone who's not living with HIV that you want them to know about women living with HIV? Sorry, my cat is stuck to my.
Which one? You have about how many you have?
I have 4.
I know. Don't act like you just have one cat.
her claws were all dug into my pants. Okay, sorry about that. Working from home, all the joys and excitement of that.
I would say to people who are not living with HIV, and we've been saying this all along, right? The HIV is not a moral issue, right? That we need to look at all the factors, right, that we can't separate from HIV, right? And just doing this doesn't cause a whole epidemic around the world. What causes a whole epidemic around the world is complacency by our decision makers, right, to provide education, to provide security for folks, right? Human rights, to provide these basic human rights for people, and then we wouldn't have an epidemic on our hands because everybody would have a place to live. Everybody, and housing is healthcare. Everybody would have the proper education about HIV in the language that they can understand, right? So I would just say so folks who are not living with HIV, we're ready to move on to the next thing. We're ready because after this, it's going to be something else. then it's going to be something else, So after 40 years, we know what it is. We know how to treat it. We know how it's contracted. We know how to prevent it, right? We know that I can't touch you and give it to you, right? We know that, and we know most of all is that it's not a moral issue. Anybody can contract HIV, and most of the times people who are transmitting HIV to another person is because they don't know their status. We are not animals. We are not horrible people that go around just spreading HIV. Most people who contract HIV are on medication. They understand, what I'm saying, they're not doing that. So so calm down. That's what I would say, because you all this sensationalism. They've made HIV such a sensational thing over the years, right? And we're in this disease 40 years into this disease, and we still don't have a cure or vaccine, right? But what we do have is some incredible medications, right? And we're learning to thrive with HIV. So so I'm ready for the next wave of something else. I'm so over this. Some people are not. I'm just talking about me, right? So, I have a lot of things to do, and HIV is not always the first thing. I'm going to take those medicines. I'm going to take my medicine. I'm going to stay in touch with you all people, but I'm still growing. Even as a person who's older, I'm learning new stuff every day, right? So I think that's what I wanted to say. I'm going to let Antoinette have some time, because we don't have a lot of time left.
I agree with everything you said. Everything you said, along with just educating yourself and also stop believing. One thing I learned today at a training was, HIV does not, you can't contract HIV because of your vulnerabilities. So that means because you want to be gay or however you identify, because you are like to have sex, because you want to, live your life pretty much, that means that you're going to contract HIV, and it's just not true. So get out of that mind space, and continue to live your best life and educate yourself.
Yeah, and we all have a responsibility to protect ourselves. So I have a responsibility to protect my partner, but my partner also has a responsibility as well, right? So all of the responsibility is not on the person who's living with HIV, right? So protect yourself. There's PrEP. There's so many things, and that's something else that they didn't have back then. Now you can take one pill once a day to lower your risk of contracting HIV, right? So there's a lot of things that we can do. So everybody should just stay safe and stay calm. That's what I would say.
Stay calm and carry on.
Yeah, carry on. I just want to just say,
now. And Waheedah, the legend, will still be 40 years from now. Waheedah is still good.
I'll still be around. I have one girl. She just calls me legend. She don't even call me Waheedah. She's like, "Hey, legend." Okay. PWN will elevate you to places that you would never, ever, ever thought that you would go. So this is an organization. This organization has my heart. I appreciate you for bringing this on, and I appreciate meeting Antoinette. And when I come to Atlanta, I'll be looking for you, because I'll be traveling. I'm not saying what anybody else should do, but I'm just saying I'm going somewhere. But it's been a pleasure sharing this space with you. I've learned so much from you today.
You as well. As soon as you started talking, I got chills, and I was like, "Oh yeah, me and Waheedah, that's gonna be my mother."
I feel that. I can feel that. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you both so much. You're both super inspiring. It was really great to meet you, Antoinette, and Waheedah. Always a pleasure. It's been too long. I look forward to catching up again soon. And you're both always invited to anything PWN, and you were both so good that we're probably gonna just have to keep inviting you back to do more Facebook Lives with us. So.
Yeah, that's how it starts.
That's how it starts. Watch out.
Awesome. I'm honored. I'm honored just to be a part of this movement.
And I'm honored to be able to work with folks like you both. So thank you so much for sharing your insights, your experience, your expertise with everyone who has been watching and the folks who will be watching later. So yeah, and for everyone who's watching, thank you for being here, and please share, because this is knowledge that all of your friends and family, whether they're living with HIV or not, can definitely use and benefit from. So please share, and love to you both and to the whole HIV community, and we'll be seeing each other soon, I hope.
Okay, happy Zero Day and happy Long Time Survivor Day, everybody.
Happy long term.
The Reunion Project's having a party Saturday. I'll send you information. Look on Facebook. Look on my Facebook page, and you can come to the party. It's free, and there's no drink minimum. Zoom. It's all on Zoom.
Dance party on Zoom. Awesome.
Dance party on Zoom. Seriously. 8 o'clock Eastern Time, 5 o'clock on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. It's a 2-hour party. So you're all invited. Come on, just go on my Facebook page and get the registration. Download your backgrounds. Your little disco stuff in the background. We sending you links for backgrounds and everything.
Sweet.
So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank
just
you.
Celebrating ourselves. Thank you so much. Just celebrating ourselves.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye.
So long, everybody. Be safe.